And we're live.
Excellent.
Yay!
Unrehearsed and ready to go.
That's it. Well, welcome everyone to episode 5 of The Conversation. Today we're going to be talking about changing direction in the food sector and the challenges that food companies are now having with the change in demand for their products and having to essentially change their entire business model just to survive. So what we're seeing is hospitality and restaurant businesses and so on trying to go online to do delivery. We're seeing manufacturers that formerly supplied the hospitality and restaurant, hotel, chain type of businesses. We're seeing them having to change their business model because their customers have evaporated overnight. So now they need to produce for retail, they need to produce for delivery, and that brings a whole load of different challenges. So, there are some options that are open to these companies, and there's the funding that's hard to get, and you need to be quick to get it. So we're going to discuss all of those kind of things as well. So I'll just introduce myself first, so that if this is your first time watching the podcast, you know who we are. So my name is James Flynn. I'm the CTO and founder of Priority Limited. We are essentially a digital food safety management software company, and we support US importers through FDA compliance, and we also support manufacturing companies in the UK and in the US to ensure they've got a robust food safety management system in place. So I'll ask Jennifer to introduce herself, and then Andy.
All right, I'm Jennifer Crandall. I am CEO and founder of Safe Food and Rude. We are a food safety consulting business located in the United States. We focus mainly on FDA, BISMA regulations, foreign supplier verification program rule being our main focus, but we also are assisting small and medium-sized businesses with their food safety programs, whether it be supplier compliance or sometimes we do work that's related to BRC or SQF certifications as well. On to Andy.
Okay, Andy Kerridge, founder and only employee of Wyvern Food Solutions. Similar business to Jennifer's in a way, and to the extent that I'm also a PCQI and do work for American importers and also work with small businesses here in the UK and anywhere else really. I have a range of clients though, some of them small businesses, some of them global blue chip businesses. So yeah, looking forward to talking about the impact of COVID-19 on the food service business.
Okay, excellent. So I'm going to come to Jennifer first on this one and get a sense of what's happening in the United States. So as we know, food service and restaurants, hotel chains, etc., they've been really badly affected by the COVID-19 crisis pandemic. What are you seeing about how they're adapting in the US market? And then I'm going to come to Andy and I will have the same question.
So, well, restaurants and that sort, of course, they've closed down their dining rooms, so they're not able to serve people and rotate through people the way they normally do. If they have the capability, many of them are doing takeout services like carry out or delivery even. And I am seeing, even in my local, I live in a small community, and in my small community, I'm noticing a lot of collaborative efforts where a pizza delivery store might be doing, they're used to doing delivery, so they're pairing up with other companies to help them do their delivery. So like right. Our local pizza guys paired up with a donut shop and is helping deliver their donuts to people as well. So I've seen that. There was also some, we saw on one of the news channels, they were talking about how an American advantage that we have is drive-through services that maybe other countries don't have, where a lot of our restaurants are set up, even, the main big ones like franchises, McDonald's and Burger King and some of those, they're already set up to do carry out, but you do it through drive-through service. So that has been an advantage. And a lot of them are, they get like 70% of their business through those stores. through the window. So they're used to doing that, and they have not changed much from what I understand. And a lot of the healthcare and first responders and that type of group of people are getting a lot of their food through those services. So that part has not changed. The ones that have really changed are the ones that have dine-in features and are struggling. They're not able to keep up. And that has a ripple effect, obviously, on the distribution chain as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the common factor here is that because people can't go to their premises anymore, the only way that they can really stay in business is to either have the food products picked up or delivered. And that brings up quite a few questions in my mind. You spoke about, different companies collaborating on, one company makes the pizzas, another company does the delivery. And of course, that's not a new model. Just Eat do that kind of thing all over Europe and so on. And I'm sure that other services like that in the US as well. But it comes to that question of how do you guarantee food safety in two different operations, which might have completely different cultures, different systems, different ways of doing things in the middle of a crisis when there's no oversight on any of it, because they're not being inspected, they're not being audited, and so on. So what are your thoughts about the risks to the general public, since now they're not eating in restaurants, so they're getting a lot of takeout or delivery? Do you think that increases the food safety risk?
I personally, I think there is a potential that there is, especially with food that needs to be kept hot. So, pizza delivery has been a long thing here in the United States. And, they have very specific designed bags to hold the boxes in so that it maintains the heat and that it's not, affected. But, for the ones that are, the companies that are not used to delivering and they have just styrofoam boxes that they put their stuff in, that obviously is not going to hold the heat in the way it needs to. It needs to be delivered in a certain amount of time. So yes, I do think that there is concern there. Some of the ones that I've seen collaborating, like I mentioned, the pizza and the donuts. Well, donuts a lot of times are, served at room temperatures. So I don't see a concern with that. I think they just have to be smart about the way they're doing it. The other company, that same pizza company, they own a frozen custard chain, and they're delivering their custard as well. I do not know how they are keeping their custard cold,
and the food hot.
Frozen.
So I haven't. Food hot and the custard.
Yeah. So I don't know how they're doing that. I imagine that they've purchased some type of freezer to hold it. Maybe it's just a cold box or something that they have dry ice in. So I'm not sure how they're doing that, but yes, there's definitely the potential of food safety risk. And I we're not hearing about it, but there may be more foodborne illness outbreaks that happen because of this.
I think the reality is that, food poisoning and food safety issues don't go away just because you're in the middle of a pandemic, right?
Right. I fear they're going to increase.
And,
to be honest,
the risks are obviously a lot higher because there's a lot of disruption in these supply chains that are now doing something new for the first time. And there may well be things that people didn't anticipate, which is why you have to do a HACCP plan. It's why you have to do a risk assessment and so on and so on. And then you need the oversight on that to ensure that it's all safe. And literally all of that has gone out the window. People are trying to survive this in the best way they can. Businesses are trying to survive this in the best way that they can. I mean, one thing we've seen here, and we tried this out last week here in Tenerife, was we got an online delivery of a farmer's box, right? And it was like 27 euros or something like that. And it was huge. It was a massive big box of fruit and vegetables. But we didn't really know what was going to be in it before we ordered it. So we had a whole bunch of stuff that we don't really eat, like papaya and apples and oranges and stuff, and we're now going to have to eat them, and it's really just a kind of a lifestyle choice for me. I don't eat a lot of fruit because of the sugar that's in it. Not that I have any problems, but I just don't want to give myself an insulin spike, for example. So, but there's lots of other great veggies in there, and most of it was really good and good quality, but there was some of it wasn't quite so good, So I'm sure that in the UK, and the farmers markets who people used to go to them and buy, they must be doing these kind of things now to adapt as well.
Absolutely. I mean, there are pop-up veg stalls in places where you wouldn't expect them, not just in markets and so forth. I was out a few days ago and in the car park of a local chapel, there was a stall selling fruit and veg. And where did that come from? But we also got one of these farmers boxes, and again, like you, we had no control really over what was in it, other than that it was either fruit or veg or a mixture of fruit and veg. that was it, 3 choices. And we got a mixture one, and unfortunately what was on top was a great big bunch of celery, which I can't stand, so that went straight in the compost. I'm sorry, if you don't like it, then what, you can use maybe 1 stick of celery as a seasoning in a soup or something.
And what if you were allergic to celery, for example?
That's very true. There was no labeling and all that.
Yeah.
So that went straight in the compost tube. So not a total waste. It'll enrich my garden and so forth. But the quality wasn't bad. But again, it's a lack of control there. So what we're seeing in the UK is, I suppose, 2 things here. One is food service. All right, going back to what Jennifer said, food service here in terms of chain restaurants, etc. Drive-through is not such a high proportion here. I seem to remember one statistic from my past which said that Americans eat something like 70% of their meals in the car. We aren't near that here.
I think from my days on the road, I have to tell you, McDonald's, Burger King, and KFC were well visited.
Yeah, I've been in one of your cars. I know where the evidence is still there.
I keep my car spotless these days.
These days, yeah, maybe. Those restaurants have closed down in the UK anyway. McDonald's, Burger King, whatever, have closed down. Now, a few of them have reopened, and I think it's partly because they're able to do drive-through, partly because they're either large enough that they can allow some social distancing in terms of people sitting down inside. And that's had a huge impact back on the suppliers.
Yeah.
Because I don't think anybody actually realised that the volume of flour and milk and beef that was going through these outlets. And we're talking now about milk being poured away by the farmers because this is a huge segment through milkshakes and soft serve, etc.
And this is not affecting just the food supply chain, but if you look at the oil industry, for example, they now have nowhere else to store crude oil production. So they're now stored in ships waiting off the coast of the United States and China and everywhere else. And those factories are going to shut down. So it's the same problem. The whole shutdown of the economy. It's not a ripple; it's a total tidal wave, isn't it? Because it's.
But these people, sort of unintended or unforeseen consequences, shut down a sector of the market, and all of a sudden, that isn't being used. So anyway, there's a few of those fast food outlets that start doing all that. But what we're seeing is 2 things. One is the restaurants; some of them are repurposing to do, if you like. Home delivery or takeaway of some of their products. So they are converting their operations to not just serving hot food, but are also doing cook chill and cook freeze. And that starts to get into a whole different area.
High risk right away. Yeah.
High risk. There are absolute requirements in terms of cooling times and stuff like that. And many of these restaurants are unlikely to have the kit to be able to do that properly.
And perhaps the technical knowledge to validate it and verify everything.
Yeah. And because everybody was, moving so quickly, it's highly unlikely they've done the HACCP appropriately. They aren't getting the enforcement visits, social distancing and all that sort of stuff. So the risk there. Then you go on to, if they're doing cook, chill, cook, freeze, they're producing in bulk. They then essentially are producing almost a retail operation. They're not labeling. These require full allergen, full ingredient, expiry dates, temperature, nutritional. They need nutritional information on, restaurants aren't going to have.
So what we're really saying is that, you know, we are literally in the middle of the Wild West as far as it comes to food safety here. You know,
Yep.
we are,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
and because the regulators can't get out there to check,
Yep.
and, you know, people are making it up as they go along. And we don't want to scare anyone here, you know, but, you know, there are a lot of good producers in the world, right? You know, and a lot of good food businesses in the world. But things do go wrong, and they definitely go wrong when the controls aren't in place and when there is no oversight on these activities.
And the unfortunate aspect of all this is there are many technically qualified people who are not working because of the shutdown, all these consultants, technical consultants, and it's making that link between those people who, you know, the restaurants in my
that's
village
something,
are not doing that.
But you can help with, Andy, right? You know, I mean, you've got a big, we all have a big network of people that can help out with these things. So if anyone's watching this and they need some help on that kind of stuff, do reach out, because we can certainly put you in touch with people who you know, might not be doing anything right now, who could jump on a Zoom call and get you going, you know, definitely.
Yeah, and I know the Chartered Institute of Environmental Health and the IFST in the UK are linking up and trying to make those linkages on these technically qualified people. But of course, you know, a consultant sat at home isn't necessarily a qualified environmental health person, but they have a set of skills which would be useful here.
A very particular set of skills, perhaps.
And then on another side, sort of linking in with what Jennifer was saying about delivery and etc., is there are these sort of farmers' box schemes and all that sort of stuff that are starting to diversify into other things going on there. And sort of transporting fruit and veg is one thing, but if you then start adding, you know, sort of meat and poultry and, you know, then the risk on that, you know, what wasn't needing to be temperature controlled suddenly becomes temperature controlled, and, you know, never mind juices and whatever flying around. So there's a whole risk there, which could be.
I mean, I think that you would hope that the majority of people who are operating in this space would do so responsibly. And that most of them are competent enough to minimize the risk whilst we're in this kind of Wild West period here at the moment. But the worry for me is there's likely to be a whole load of opportunists who don't know anything about food safety and whatnot, who are trying to capitalize on this because there is no oversight, there is no scrutiny that's available to shut them down. You know, so you could have fly-by-nights popping up and selling, you know, poultry that's past its sell-by date, for example, or some of this milk that's going to waste, and, you know, repurposing.
I think the biggest risk is
else,
it's not going to not necessarily past its sell-by date, but it's going to be stuff that may not have been stored correctly,
or handled or processed correctly.
And the thing is,
pasteurized correctly too. Oh
well, no, there's an element there, but you know, there is definitely a market for this type of product. People are very keen to support local businesses and so forth, and some of these local business, they're doing it with the right, you know, it's from the heart, but not necessarily, you know, with enough of the brain.
Not necessarily using the brain, Or having
I've been saying it for 15 years at least, that people don't know what they don't know. I think that there's a lot of good people out there trying to do the right thing and trying to make sure that we have, you know, food out there, but I think that they just don't have that connection. Like you said, I love the idea that the UK is helping to try to match up some of that, you know, to give people advice on how to manage this a little bit. I don't know. I'd have to look on our regulatory sites if the FDA and the local, state, and county governments are trying to help. I'm not seeing that from the officials as much as just focusing on the high level, you know, 90,000 feet kind of point of view on it. So getting down to that granular level, that's really a good thing. I'd like to see that with our regulatory agencies as well, trying to step back in and look at, okay, how do we move forward? Because right now, from the American side of it, and I was just speaking about it with my neighbor, there's no plan. Like, we don't have a plan what it looks like after all this stuff lifts. And just to shift a little bit, you know, you're talking about all this milk being dumped. in the supply chain, all this produce. We have a lot of conversations about the produce industry. When the harvest is due, all these migrant workers are not allowed to come work on the field. So we're going to lose the yield that we normally get from that. So what happens whenever we're on the other side of this, when we start reopening and we don't have the supply to fill the need? We're going to go back into a supply and demand issue where now we're going to have high priced items again, and we're already fighting a hunger problem.
And everyone's got less money because their reserves have been eaten up.
Yeah, and I keep thinking too, James. I'm curious. I know I'm asking, kind of shifting, taking the role of the interviewer, but curious what your thoughts are on how blockchain could help with remedying some of this. Because I'm like, if our farmers can't match up to the people that need the food, then at least in the United States, I'm seeing this where they can't match up to the people that need the food because they have, large companies that they were working with prior, and now they're trying to figure out how to get into those places. And the stores, we're hearing that stores are limiting some of the purchase on items. So then you're continuing to help it. We're culling herds, like the small dairy farms are told to cull their herds at this point. So we're going to lose cattle through this process, increase it into the meat industry, maybe, or just have dead animals sitting on our farms because we're culling our herds, or animals set free to not produce. So either way, we have a huge supply problem, and it's not matched up to the people that are fighting hunger and have less money. So I keep thinking blockchain could have helped with this if we would have been a little bit more ahead of the game with the food industry. What do you think?
Well, I think I don't necessarily think blockchain is the solution or the answer to that. What at its basic level is needed is to match supply with demand. And if there is no demand for a particular product and you've got overcapacity, then standard economics says the price is going to go into free fall, just like we saw with oil, and we'll see with other commodities as well, I'm sure. So this is really about how, coming back to some of what we spoke about last time, digitization. How do you digitize the supply chain to understand where the capacity is and where the demand is, and then be able to match them? Now, retailers are very good at that in their own supply chains. So in the UK, for example, Wimbledon's coming up. Everyone eats a ton of strawberries at Wimbledon, and strawberries and cream is a very traditional thing. So the growers work around that to grow the right amount of strawberries for that time. And then they also do things like, they know there's some bad weather coming in, so people are going to be eating more soup over the next week. They do that kind of thing as well. So they're very good in their own supply chains. But I think in terms of the world, there already is a lot of food waste that goes on in everywhere, by people buying too much or buying things that go off and this sort of thing. And yet there are people starving who could have really benefited from that meal, So again, it's about matching supply with demand and how you do that. Whether it's the poorest in our own society nearby, which would have to be for fresher foods and so on. Or whether it's being able to take more ambient stable products and get them to a country that's in dire need. India right now is a disaster zone, absolute disaster zone. A huge amount of their economy is what they call day workers, like back in the 20s and 30s or before, you would pitch up and get a job for the day and earn $2 or whatever it is, and these people are relying on that money to feed their families, and they have no savings. Many of them don't even have a proper house. They're living in a shack or even on the street. And there are millions and millions and millions of these people. And right now, these guys are getting nothing. We're very lucky. We'll come on to talk about funding in a moment. But, there are parts of the world where our ability to support life and support those people is gone out the window. It's a Wild West. So it's an interesting segue, as you would say, Jennifer, to come back and talk about how businesses, what resources are available for businesses. So, in the UK, they've got some various different schemes, depending on whether you're a big business, a small business, a startup, or whether you're self-employed. And, for me, for my business, thankfully, so far, I'm not adversely affected by this, but there is zero support for my business because I don't fit into any of those categories. You know, yes, I'm a startup, but the rule in this country is you need to have had £250,000 equity investment in your business in the last 5 years to qualify for some of the funding that is available. And I think we're probably shy of that by about, I don't know, 50,000 or something like that. You know, so we just don't qualify for that, which is kind of weird. However, we've got our Innovate UK funding, and that does tide us over until November anyway. So we're kind of okay. So I'm not complaining too much about that. What about the funding support for businesses, small and large, in the US, Jennifer? Could you tell us a bit more about that by comparison?
Yeah, well, I don't know about the large businesses and how they're getting impacted, except for trying to get keep people on as much as possible, and if they don't, then those people can apply for unemployment. So I can't remember the last numbers that I saw for unemployment. It was around 5 million people that were.
I heard it was 12 million already in the United States.
Oh, I'm not surprised. I can't keep up with the data because there's so much. I'm barely trying to keep up with my state and how many COVID cases we have. But the Small Business Administration is one of the organizations that they're funded by the federal government. And they just put out several different options for small business loan people to take out loans. And so there was a forgivable loan, there were payroll protection to make sure that your people could get paid. If you keep them on, you use 75% of that money to pay them. And that came out probably 3.5 weeks ago, and they're already out of money. And I can't remember the total amount of money that was in there. It was like $2.2 trillion US dollars that was in that fund. And what they did though, and there's a lot of negative publicity about it right now, but they gave the option to restaurants and hotel chains to be able to apply for it. A small business in the United States is defined as a company that has less than 500 people, employees. So those larger hotel chains and restaurants were written into the way the bill was written, and so they basically were allowed to apply. They took all the money, and I'm sure the federal government was like, "Oh crap! Like we didn't mean for that to happen." So they're correcting it. We're supposed to hear more today about it. That there might be a second bill that's released to allow us to do more loans and get more funding. But to your point, my business, and I was kind of mentioning this earlier that before the call. My business, I only hire subcontractors part-time, and we call them 1099 employees. That's just a form that we have to fill out for tax purposes. And I was told by my bank I was not allowed to apply until last week, and the money went dry by the time I was allowed to apply. So I don't know if it will be any better this round for me. And because I'm a startup, I'm still building. I'm only 2 years old into my business, and I don't have any type of funding at this point. I'm looking for, investment opportunities and working with some organizations to do that so I can scale up faster. So my hope is that I can build that in the back end. But honestly, I've just been, I'm minimally affected because most of my clients were serving retailers. So I was okay because they were serving the retail side instead of the food service industry, thankfully. One of my former clients was a food service manufacturer only. And I'm sure I would have been cut from there. If we weren't already finished with the project that we were working on, I'm sure I would have been let go at that point, and so I would have lost significant income at that point in my business.
Yeah, and this is the I think we three are relatively fortunate in that we serve the manufacturing element of the food sector mainly, and it just so happens that the mix of customers that certainly that I have is they're busy. One of our customers hired a whole bunch of people to keep up with demand, and so we're lucky on that front. But coming back to the the way out of this, because I don't see this. People have been on the news this week, and I'm sure it's been the same there, Jennifer, talking about we need a plan to lift the lockdown, right? And I'm really struggling to see how they're going to be able to do that without, a second wave of this whole thing coming, and then us all being back in the same position.
When you look at the Spanish flu history in the United States, that was in 1918. There were two more resurgences of it, and they were both deadlier than the ones before. The White House and the United States has put out guidelines that for each state, in order for us to lift this, we have to go 14 days going in a downward trend. And we have to have healthcare capacity to be able to handle it. They need robust testing capabilities, which right now supply chain is our biggest problem with that.
Yep.
And our governor keeps talking about the Q-tip, the cotton swabs that they shove in your nose to test. And then the other thing that they're struggling with is getting reagent to be able to test. So I thought that was interesting. And then having PPE, we have a huge PPE shortage. I'm sure it's global. So if we can't solve those, we're not allowed to reopen, which I find hilarious, because the state of Georgia basically announced their reopening. Like, I don't know if it was today, but they're reopening earlier than anyone else. And I think one or two other states just went on lockdown. So, we have 50 different unique minds over here, and a few other, we don't know what we're doing.
And I think that's the nature of the problem here. The genie is out of the bottle here, and the real challenge is going to be getting that genie back in the bottle, and that is not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. And I can't help but think that two major things that are going to happen as we get ready to come out of lockdown is that everyone needs to wear a mask and know how to wear it properly, and everyone needs to have hand sanitizer. So these two product lines, I think, are going to be in massive demand, not just for the next few months, for the next couple of years, because these measures are going to be on and off and on and off for a good period until they come up with a vaccine, which they're saying is early next year, at the very earliest. A couple of other worrying things, just don't want to focus too much on the virus itself, but a couple of other worrying things. It's now been demonstrated that this virus, the COVID-19 virus, mutates at a much, much faster rate than any other coronavirus they've ever seen. So what they're saying is that the strain of the virus that's in Europe is actually is way, way more deadly than the strain of the virus that's in, say, Singapore or Korea or whatever. And the strain of the virus that's in New York is the European strain of the virus, which is the deadly one. And in other parts of the United States is the milder one. And this kind of explains some of the differences in, the death rates and the rate of growth of the virus and all these kind of things. So for me, I think that's very, very concerning, particularly because I believe that this is an airborne virus that exists on microparticles in the air, long after the person who was in that room just breathing, not sneezing or coughing, but just breathing. We emit small particles. And if you're on a frosty day and you see the water vapor that comes out of your mouth, you'll understand this. Some of those are going to be micro droplets with the virus in them. So I remain convinced that this is an airborne virus, and that face masks are absolutely going to be required for everyone to be wearing when they're in a public place. And that is going to make the PPE problem even worse, because right now the face masks are more or less reserved for the healthcare workers, first line responders, so on. But once you go outside of that and everyone needs to have a face mask, then the supply chain clearly doesn't have the capacity to cope now, never mind once the wider populations start to require face masks. What's your thoughts on that, Andy?
It depends what you mean by a face mask. Different countries have different requirements. I know in some Eastern European countries or Central European countries, a snood, what you would wear skiing or whatever, is adequate. And to be honest, that is going to have an effect.
It'll have some kind of effect. Yeah, it's better than nothing, right?
Yeah, exactly. And if I know the UK is debating the issue at the moment because you know, there's two issues. One is that WHO guidelines are still that face masks, etc. Are not required. But there's clearly, you know, some evidence coming up that it's protecting other people rather than protecting you. So if they were to go for a snood type approach, that doesn't impact on the health services at all. We've got a real issue in the UK as well in terms of PPE for the health sector. So if
keep talking, I'm going to go get my face mask. I have one that was homemade. Okay. I want to show you. I'll be right back.
I'll get mine too. Keep talking, Andy. Keep talking. I'll get mine too.
I've got 3 in the house. The snoods, because they're winter cycling. They're really good for, you know, your neck and
yeah.
So you know, if they took that step, then I think people would be that wouldn't be seen as a negative regard to the health services. But yeah, you know, in the UK, I think we've had something like 10,000 deaths or whatever it is. That's still only a quarter.
No. 16, over 16,000 as of today.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's still a third of the deaths from the flu that we had 5-6 years ago. So let's just, you know, okay, there's a lot more, you know, very sad and so forth, but every year people die from flu.
Yeah, but do they die at this rate? And do they die with this variation across the population, you know?
Well, yeah, but I'd say 4 or 5 years ago in the UK, there were 50,000 deaths from flu. In England, not just not the whole of the UK. So,
yeah, but right now I think we're in this situation where all of the healthcare resources have been deployed, and already we're at 16,000. There are still 800 to 900 people a day dying in the UK, for example. I mean, the US, there's over 43,000 people died already. You know, it's just
it's the difference between normal flu and this is the speed at which those cases are coming on board, and it's overwhelming the health system. And also, these people who are suffering from COVID-19 spend a long time in hospital. It isn't just in for 3-4 days. My wife's an intensive care nurse. She's saying, you know, typically they're there for 2-3 weeks.
Yep.
And then
and now we're seeing that people are either catching it again. They've had it once and they're catching it again. Or I wonder if their tests came back negative, and now they're positive. Like, would they have been positive with it? Yeah, I'm wondering now. But I just saw somebody else saying that the long-term effects that they're seeing from it, they're still having some complications. Yeah, so they were released from the hospital and then they have more problems and end up back in the hospital. So yeah, it's frightening. And I think it's just the volume of people that are getting affected by it all at once. You know, I keep thinking for our side of it that people just don't quite get they're like, let's just kind of do the herd immunity concept and send everybody out into the world and let them just catch it and, you know, hope for the best. I'm like, but
if you do that, there's going to be massive amount of deaths. That's the problem.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. We'll be putting mass graves in. So.
Yeah. And look at, I mean, in the UK, we had Boris Johnson, who was in hospital and all that sort of stuff. The health secretary, Matt Hancock, I mean, it was nothing, you know, it was it was nothing for him, and there's quite a range of symptoms and reactions.
There's definitely something. There's some kind of part of the immune system which this virus targets, and if you've got that weakness in your immune system, you're getting it. You know.
Well, and do you think? I wonder, with all the mutations that are happening, is it also depending on where the weakness is in your body? So it doesn't matter. Like I have hypothyroidism. Is it going to attack my thyroid issues? My husband has pancreatitis, and it's a congenital defect. There's nothing we can do. Is it going to affect his pancreas? So I keep wondering those types of things. Is it a smart virus or something? So it's definitely smarter than us right now, for sure.
Yeah, it's taking us to the cleaners, that's for sure. So let's do the mask thing. So that's cute.
that's my Purdue mask. My mom made.
It's even logoed.
Mine was made from a piece of kitchen roll, and it's got little string bits that go around my ears, but I can't do it for the headphones.
Yeah, no, you can't do it for things. Yeah.
So this is made with 2 bits of string. So I'll just show you here 2 bits of string, and there's a staple. You can see that. don't know if you can see that in the light. There's a staple there, and it's lined with kitchen roll on the outside and a bit of tissue. Excuse me.
Now try doing that with a mask on.
Oh no!
That's you. So anyway, you know, this cost nothing to make. I made 10 of them, and I'm keeping them for when we do eventually go through the airport to get home.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But it's better than nothing. You know, it's not a medical mask, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah.
So my mom was making. She has probably spit out about 600 or 700 masks so far. And she is in a sewing club, so they're making masks for our first responders and all the people that are essential in the hospitals. But the way they made it, and I don't have the plans, but it's like it's cloth, it's regular cloth cotton on the front, and then the inside has flannel. Yeah. So it's a flannel cotton, and then she's stitching it, the elastic on the ears, and then I'm seeing things where you can, because the healthcare workers are getting rubbed on the back of their ears quite a bit, so they're making for the women, they have buttons that they're putting on a headband to put it on.
And you know, the point is about these things. They're not N95, which means that it catches 95% of particles, or N99 and so on. But you know, it's kind of like I think if there's multi-layers there, then it's like the Swiss cheese thing. You know, you get you know, the particle does get through, there's another layer, the probability is it's going to get caught in that layer, and so on. So if you've got 2 or 3 layers, that can increase the effectiveness just through sheer physics, right? That can increase the effectiveness, but it's never going to be as good as a surgical mask, which is designed for that, you know.
So taking this back to the food industry, so we're seeing a increase in the United States in our meat plants having COVID and shutting down because the employees have it because of close proximity. And most of them wore masks already, I believe. So I just found that interesting.
But you're in a wet environment where there's lots of blood around, and you know the virus is going to be you know, I know it's a family show, right? But we're from the food industry.
But you're right.
And I've been in many an abattoir, you know. So, but you know,
I don't know.
It's a place where it's going to spread. So I actually heard that they found the virus in the River Seine in Paris. Seine. Which again suggests, you know, that maybe the virus is coming out through the sewerage system and getting into the water there, you know. So
I wonder what the treatments will be, because, like, you know, the sanitation treatments for our water and recycled water.
Yeah, you know, these are all issues, and you know, the question in my mind is, does this virus survive in seawater? You know, once it gets out there, you know, so. We know that it's a virus that's covered in a fatty type of substance. That's what protects it, and that's why soap is so effective at killing it, right? So if it isn't applied, if detergents are not applied to the water treatment aspect, then that virus will survive and it will get out into the wilds. Then you're looking at, does it infect other animals? You know, does it jump the species barrier again into fish, for example? Does it, jump the species barrier into game and meat and so on? You know, who knows? I mean, I'm not a virologist, but clearly, if it can go one way from one species to another, if that's what the actual cause was, and so on, then
wasn't there a tiger found with it at one of the zoos?
The Bronx Zoo, and
we talked about cats having it as well. So clearly, it can cause species divide. So that is a concern.
And this is the real. You know, you think about this. You know, we're already in a tight spot as it is as a species dealing with this. But you know, if it goes wider and becomes completely ubiquitous, then the only way is herd immunity, and that is only good if you have the same strain of that virus, you know. So, and then if it does mutate, again, we're not wanting to scare anyone here, you know, but these are all the possibilities that happen.
And this is food science perspective, not virologist perspective.
Correct.
So
correct. Our opinions are our own. This is not the official policy of Priority or Wyvern or Safe Food On.
Right.
Okay, so obviously, it's a difficult time, so I'd just like to kind of sum up with some thoughts from both of you in terms of food businesses and how they can survive these difficult times. Some are just not, in my opinion, there's going to be a lot of businesses that will not re-emerge from this because
absolutely.
Their cash reserves will be gone. They will not have the credit worthiness to get the funding that they need, either from a bank or from an investor. The government isn't an open-ended pot of money. So I think some business owners will inevitably take the decision, that's it for me, I'm out. They might be late in their career, they might have just started, whatever, it's going to be devastating to a lot of different people.
You see Virgin Australia has been put into administration, and Richard Branson's offering to sell one of his islands or whatever to get some government funding.
Well, there's it's just a metaphor for everything else that's going on.
It is, but it's not just the small businesses here, some large businesses suffering as well.
Absolutely. So coming to you first, Andy, in terms of some thoughts on hope, what can you offer? Because we've been a bit negative today, so we need to bring it back.
It has been, hasn't it? It has been a little bit down and doom and gloom on it.
Right, come on, give us some hope, Andy.
Well, I mean, clearly there are businesses that are doing very well in spite of COVID-19 and retail and so forth. And yes, I know we were a little critical and doomsaying about some of the measures that some people have taken to repurpose their businesses and so forth. But doing it well offers great rewards. So just, before you take that step of doing something you're not familiar with, there are people out there who can help you. There are people who can offer you guidance, etc., and make sure that you do it the right way. And doing it the right way, will lead to longer-term success.
Yeah, I mean, it's an opportunity to come out of this with a more robust business model than you had when you went into it, because you're going to acquire a whole load of new customers and get some loyalty from them and so on. Yeah, that's a great point, Andy. Jennifer, what's your vision for hope?
Well, I just had a couple of things that I was writing down. One thing that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce said to in a call with the Small Business Administration last week was, this is a great time to revisit your business model, and just kind of echo what Andy said. There's great rewards if you can find a way that you can fit into this market right now from the food industry perspective. And saying that, there are experts waiting to help to be able to help you navigate the food safety concerns. Like, I think the biggest theme that we have here is, we as food safety experts are concerned about the, just the different types of activities that are going on, the quick shifting models that are happening that could put our food supply chain at risk and our consumers at risk. But there are experts waiting. We're here, we're ready to work. We know people that can, and we're here and available. So there's some hope there too. You don't have to do this alone. We can help you. So if I had any hope, that would be to put it out there just as not just a self plug, but more, if you don't know where to go, come to us. We'll help you.
Yeah, we could almost title the podcast "You Are Not Alone."
Yes,
absolutely.
Because, we need to, yes, we spent probably 20 minutes talking about the downside of it all, but there is a brighter side to this.
Well, you need to have hope. To have hope is to be human, and if you're going to be successful in anything, you've got to have hope that one day you can get there with that and reach a goal. Look, I think this has been a great conversation today. Covered a lot of points. Just a note for our listener. We don't script this. We write down a couple of points and we start there, and we see where the conversation takes us. We try to keep this informal and lighthearted, but have some serious discussion as well. So if you do have any topics you would like us to address, or conversation you'd like to see us have, then please write them down in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And also sign up for the registration button so that we can email you when we've published a new podcast. But I've been James Flynn of Primority, and Jennifer, you've been?
Jennifer Crandall of Safe Food and Root.
And Andy, you've been?
Andy Kerridge at Wyvern Food Solutions.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much to everyone who's listening, and I'll see you guys soon, and goodbye from the conversation.
Thanks.